Hi everyone, so I've been playing this game for a long time, but I've never had that much interest in 1v1 games because they just weren't as much fun as team games. But I have taken an interest in watching some of the World Series games on YouTube, and I have a lot of admiration for these top players. So I decided to rank the best players in World Series history. Bear in mind that this is a ranking based purely on statistics and ones that I've chosen personally. It does not take into account anything else like clan wars or just sentiment. Also bear in mind that some players have probably played under different names, which obviously would change the ranking. I tried to do my best to figure out who was who, but it's quite possible there were some mistakes that were made. This list takes into account all tournaments until 2022. I will make a new list once the 2023 World Series is over. So first of all, let's talk about players on the rise that might make it to the top 20 in the future. First off, we have Big Ganja from Bosnia, who seems to be a fairly recent player. He was in the last 64 in 2022, and I mention him because in the current championship that has started, he has qualified for the last 16, so he definitely looks like a player on the rise and one to watch out for. Next up we have a German player called Satanic. Now this seems to be another fairly recent player. He got to the last 32 in 2021, and last year he beat Firelord, so he was already showing quite a lot of promise, and so far in the 2023 edition he beat Scuba, who is an expert player. So yeah, definitely this is a player on the rise. Next up is Iranian player Liftruk. There's quite a few videos of him on YouTube, so he's already pretty well known. His best result so far was a last 32 in 2022 when he beat a really good player called Assad, and so far in 2023 he's qualified for the last 16. So yeah, this is definitely one player that has a lot of promise. Next up is a young Ukrainian player who seems to be taking the game by storm. He was recently elevated to master rank, which is absolutely amazing for a 15-year-old, and I have watched him beat Xcal on YouTube several times, so this is definitely one of the most promising new players and possibly a future winner of the World Series. It will probably be quite tough with all the pressure and expectations on him, but I definitely think he has it in him. Next up is Italian player called Machiavelli, who has qualified in the last 16 in the previous two World Series and has once again this year qualified for the last 16. So yeah, this definitely does seem to be a rising talent. Next up is Egyptian player Marakar. Now this is already a pretty big star in 0 Hour. He's one of the few players to have reached master rank. Like Tumstep, he hasn't managed to break through in the World Series yet, but I'm pretty confident that he will. Also worth mentioning is that he is the best player in the Rise of the Reds mod, so yeah, it'll definitely be interesting to see how far Marakar will go in the 2023 World Series. Then we have Staz, a Russian player. Now he isn't new, but he has been getting some pretty good results in recent years. He was particularly impressive last year when he beat Boyka on his way to the quarterfinals, and this year he's once again made it to the last 16, so definitely Staz is a player to watch. Next up is another Russian player called SPL. He isn't particularly new, but he has improved recently. In particular, last year he beat Firelord and Machiavelli on his way to the quarterfinals. It'll be interesting to see this year if he can reiterate this success or perhaps do even better. Next up we have Raging K, also known as Shane, from Syria. Now this player has had quite a lot of success in recent years. In 2020 he reached the quarterfinals, and in 2021 he got 3rd place. This year he's managed to get to the last 16. So this is definitely a player that's very strong at the moment and who will probably break into the top 20 after the end of this tournament. Now finally we get to the top 20 with a player called Azus UA from Ukraine, also known as Owen Cover. Now this is potentially where I made a mistake, because I'm not sure he finished third in 2019. He was leading 4-2 against Caro, but I didn't find the rest of the matches. But anyway, because he was leading 4-2, I'll presume that he finished third in 2019, and I'll correct it in a later video if that's not the case. Now, unless he's changed names, he doesn't seem to be participating in this year's championship. Whatever may be the case, his results throughout the years earn him a place in the top 20. In 19th place we have British player called Hawkey. He seems to be one of the older players, and I'm not sure he's still active. He has had 6 appearances in the World Series, so he has raked in quite a lot of points, and his best result was 3rd in 2015. In 18th place I put American player Firelord, who also goes under the name of Optic. Now this player has been in the World Series a whopping 9 times, and his best result was 3rd in 2017. Now unless he's changed names, it doesn't look like he is participating in this year's edition. Next up is a player from Malaysia called Vivid. He is currently considered to be definitely in the top 10 zero-hour players at the moment. He does seem to be fairly recent. He has had 3 participations in the World Series so far, each time getting pretty far with a best result of 3rd last year. So this is an exciting player to watch and a potential winner of the World Series. Next up we have a player from Latvia called Abruzzi, also known as Gattuso. He seemed to be active 10 years ago, but I'm not sure if he still plays today. He hasn't been in any of the recent World Series anyway. His best result was 2nd in 2011 when he lost to Size in the final. In 15th place I have Armenian player Ruiz, who seemed to be at a higher level 10 years ago. His best result was 2nd in 2012. Now this player is still active. In the 2023 World Series he got knocked out in the first round, although it was by Size, so that was to be expected. It'll be interesting to see if he can reiterate some of his past performances in the future. In 14th place I have an Israeli player called Tasmany. This player qualified for the World Series an impressive 6 times, with a best result being 2nd in 2016 when he lost to Dominator in the final. I'm not sure if he's still active. I haven't seen him in any of the recent World Series. In 13th place is a player from New Zealand called Herb. This player has qualified an amazing 9 times for the World Series. He seems to be a very consistent player, having qualified for at least the last 16 on 7 occasions, with a best result being 3rd in 2016. He wasn't in this year's World Series, so I'm not sure how active he is at the moment. In 12th place we have a very talented player from Iraq called Google. He's been very successful at the game over a long period of time, being already in a semi-final in 2011 and has still been active fairly recently with another semi-final in 2021. His best result was 3rd in 2012. In 11th place we have expert British player called Scuba. This is a very consistent player who has qualified for the World Series 9 times, including this year. He qualified for the last 16 7 times, which is very impressive. Although this year he wasn't as strong as in the past, as he got knocked out in the last 32 by rising German player Satanic. Nevertheless, this remains a very talented and dangerous player who could still get some great results in the future. Now we get to the top 10 with players that I consider to be legends of the game. In 10th place we have British player Logica, who was world champion in 2019 after beating Boyka in a very close final. He also managed to reach the quarterfinals in 2015 and 2020. Although he still plays 0 hour, he's not as active as in the past, and he hasn't taken part in this year's World Series. Just a couple of points ahead of him is another legendary player from the Netherlands called Rage. He is the 2014 World Champion with a well-deserved win over Size in the final. I haven't seen him around in a long time, so I'm not sure if he's still active. Whatever may be the case, he has achieved more than enough to be in the game's Hall of Fame. In 8th place we have a player from Lithuania called Fargo. This is the best player in the list who has not yet won the World Series. He is considered to be one of the very best players at the moment and definitely a player who has the potential to win it. Amazingly, he's managed to get to the last 4 in the World Series on 4 occasions, and on 2 of these occasions he was in the final, losing to Sexy in 2018 and Xcal in 2021. It would be very nice to see him win the World Series, so fingers crossed. In 7th place we have British player Dominator, who wears well his name as he is next to impossible to beat by a regular player. He has qualified for the World Series an amazing 10 times, and on 5 of these occasions he got at least to the quarterfinals, and with a best result of being World Champion in 2016. It's also worth noting that Dominator has the best 0-hour channel on YouTube and is a great commentator of games. In 6th place we have German player Sexy, who seemed to be at the top of his game 5 years ago, but doesn't seem to be as active today, unless he has changed names. I haven't seen him recently. He reached the World Series final in 2017 and then won it in 2018. He also reached the last 16 on 3 other occasions. In 5th place we have a genius from America called Boyka, who became one of the very best players in the game when he reached the final in 2019 and then became World Champion in 2020, beating none other than Xcal in the final. I remember playing this player ages ago 1v1 and it was a total piss take. He's still very active and has a pretty good YouTube channel, and I think that he definitely can win the World Series again in the future. In 4th place we have a legendary German player called DK Crazy, who no longer seems to be active. He is the 2017 World Champion when he beat compatriot Sexy in the final, and was also 2nd in 2015 and 3rd in 2020. It would be great to see him again in the World Series. 3rd player on my list is Swiss player Caro. He has reached the semi-finals an amazing 5 times, including 2 third places in 2011 and 2014, and was World Champion in 2013 after beating Scuba. His last appearance in the World Series was in 2020 when he reached the quarterfinals, so I'm not sure if this player is still active. 2nd is probably the greatest player in the game ever, British legend Xcal. Unlike the player who is first on this list, he stopped playing the game between 2013 and 2019. For this reason he has accumulated less points in the World Series, but he has beat the player above him in this list in 2 out of 3 encounters. He won the first edition in 2010 and has been dominating the game ever since he came back, winning in 2021 and 2022. He is the current World Champion and looks unbeatable. In terms of statistics, the greatest player ever in the World Series so far is Danish legend Size. He has reached the final a whopping 6 times and is the only other player with Xcal that has been World Champion more than once, winning the World Championship 3 times in 2011, 2012 and 2015. So it has been a while since he's been champion. Will he be World Champion a 4th time this year? We will soon find out. I hope you enjoyed this video, I hope you enjoyed watching the World Series, and I'll see you around.